Lucky was once a cheerful and energetic Labrador, living in a warm and loving family. With his golden fur, bright black eyes, and a tail that never stopped wagging with joy, Lucky was an indispensable member of the household. Every day, he was taken for walks, played in the garden, and at night, he would lie by the foot of the sofa, basking in the warmth of the people he loved most. But that happiness didn't last forever. One day, Lucky's family decided to move away. They packed their belongings, suitcases, and memories. But they forgot Lucky, or rather, they chose not to take him along. Lucky was left behind in the backyard, like an old item no longer of any value. At first, he didn't understand what was happening. Lucky patiently waited, his eyes fixed on the back door, hoping his owners would return to take him. But as days turned into nights, that hope slowly faded, as no one ever came back. Hunger and thirst began to take over. There was no more food in his bowl, and the water in his dish had long dried up. At night, the biting cold cut through his fur, leaving Lucky curled up in the dark, lonely and frightened. He couldn't understand why the humans who once loved him, who had petted him and called his name with affection, could abandon him so cruelly. Memories of his family became distant, like dreams that vanish with the morning sun. Finally, Lucky decided to leave the house he once called home. Starving, cold, and desperate, he stepped onto the unfamiliar streets, not knowing where he was going. Wandering through the streets, Lucky was met with indifference and coldness from people. Some looked at him with disdain, while others chased him away as if he were a nuisance. Cars sped by, their honk startling and scaring Lucky. He scavenged for food in trash bins, but most of what he found was inedible waste. Occasionally, he'd find a dry piece of bread or leftover bones, but it was never enough to sustain him. At night, Lucky curled up in some hidden corner, under a porch or beside a garbage bin, trying to find warmth in the cold night. He missed the days of lying by the fireplace, missed the smell of the old blanket his family used to cover him with. Once, Lucky was pelted with stones by a group of children, who laughed as he ran away in fear. Another time, an elderly man drove him away with a stick when he approached, hoping for a scrap of food. But not everyone was cruel to Lucky. A street vendor occasionally left him a small piece of meat, accompanied by a sympathetic glance. However, such acts of kindness were rare and never enough to erase the loneliness and hunger that surrounded Lucky. He began to grow visibly thinner. His once glossy golden coat was now dirty and matted. His steps became heavier, and the bright sparkle in his eyes was replaced with weariness and sorrow. Yet deep in his heart, Lucky still carried a faint glimmer of hope. He believed that somewhere out there, someone would open their heart, reach out, and save him. But would Lucky ever find light in this darkness? Or would his fate forever be buried beneath the indifference of the world? That winter night was colder than usual. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying a bone-chilling frost. Emily, a young woman just finishing a long day at work, walked along her usual path home. She wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck, her hands buried deep in the pockets of her coat to shield them from the biting cold. The streets were nearly deserted, save for the echo of her footsteps in the silence of the night. As she passed by a narrow alley, she stopped abruptly when her eyes caught sight of a small figure curled up in the shadows. Emily slowed her pace, trying to get a clearer view. Under the dim glow of a street lamp, she saw a dog, thin to the point where its ribs were visible. Its golden coat, once shiny, was now matted and dirty, streaked with mud. But what truly stopped Emily in her tracks was the dog's eyes, eyes that held both pain and a faint, fragile glimmer of hope. She froze. She had heard stories of abandoned dogs and their tragic fates. But this was the first time she had witnessed such heartbreak up close. A surge of compassion and sorrow welled up inside her. The dog lifted its head slightly as Emily approached. It didn't bark or run away but simply looked at her with a mix of fear and pleading. Emily knelt down, reaching out gently. "Oh, you poor thing. How long have you been here?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The dog didn't respond, only flinching slightly as her hand touched its cold, trembling body. She could feel its frailty beneath her fingers. Unable to walk away, Emily quickly shrugged off her coat and wrapped it around the dog to provide some warmth. "I can't leave you here," she said firmly, her eyes filled with determination. Though it was late and she was exhausted from her long day, Emily knew that helping this dog was more important than anything else. Cradling the dog in her arms, she felt its small body relax slightly, as if it sensed safety in her presence. "You'll be okay," she whispered, as if making a promise to the dog and to herself. Emily flagged down a taxi and headed straight to the nearest animal shelter. On the ride there, she held the dog close, stroking it gently and murmuring reassurances. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, letting out a sigh. "A stray? You see them all the time around here. Not everyone stops to help." Emily offered a faint smile, her eyes never leaving the dog in her arms. "I couldn't just leave it," she replied resolutely. At the shelter, Emily quickly informed the staff and handed the dog over to them. The workers sprang into action, examining the dog and providing it with food and water. They immediately noticed its malnourished state, its frail frame, and a small injury on its leg that required attention. Emily watched from a distance, her heart aching as they carried the dog into the examination room. She knew she had done the right thing, but she couldn't shake her worry. A staff member approached her with a gentle smile. "You did a wonderful thing bringing this dog here. We'll make sure it gets the care it needs to recover." Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It has a chance now, right?" she asked, her voice tinged with hope. The staff member nodded, reassuring her that the dog had a strong chance of recovery with proper care. After completing the necessary paperwork, Emily left the shelter with a sense of relief mixed with lingering emotion. She couldn't stop thinking about the dog's eyes, those eyes filled with pain but flickering with a glimmer of hope. That night, back home, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept wondering if the dog would recover quickly, if it would find a loving home. Though the future was uncertain, she felt warmth in knowing she had given a small, fragile life a second chance. Lucky arrived at the shelter in a critical state. His frail body revealed every rib. His once golden fur was matted, filthy, and lifeless. He was barely holding on, his breathing weak, and his tired eyes half closed as though he had given up all hope. Emily couldn't take her eyes off Lucky. She stayed at the shelter throughout the night, sitting just outside the emergency room, clutching the scarf she had wrapped around him earlier. She prayed, hoping for a miracle to save this little dog who had already endured so much. The veterinarians acted immediately. They conducted a thorough examination, determining that Lucky was severely malnourished and had a wound on his leg from a shard of glass. His body temperature was dangerously low, And signs of dehydration indicated that he had gone days without sufficient food or water. The shelter staff worked tirelessly. They gently cleaned Lucky's fur, dressed his wounds, and administered intravenous fluids to provide his frail body with the nutrients it so desperately needed. Emily watched everything through the glass door, her heart aching each time Lucky flinched in fear when someone approached him. He still couldn't trust humans. And loud noises or sudden movements sent him recoiling in panic. Emily decided to stay by his side, hoping her presence would provide some comfort. She sat quietly beside the small kennel where Lucky lay on a soft blanket prepared by the shelter staff. She softly called his name, her voice gentle, as if to reassure him that he wasn't alone and that things would get better. In the following days, Lucky's recovery was slow but steady. He was given small, carefully portioned meals to accommodate his weakened body. At first, Lucky hesitated to eat, his cautious eyes darting around as if fearing the food would be taken away. But with the patience and care of the staff and Emily, he gradually began to accept the meals, albeit slowly. The wounds on Lucky's body were treated with care, and he slowly regained the strength to stand and take a few tentative steps. However, the scars on Lucky's heart were not as easy to heal. The memories of abandonment, hunger, and coldness from humans were deeply etched in his mind. Lucky still flinched at the sound of approaching footsteps and recoiled when he heard a door slam shut. Emily realized that while Lucky's body was on the mend, his spirit remained haunted by the traumas of his past. This realization strengthened her resolve to stay by his side, helping him rebuild his trust in humanity. Emily began spending more time at the shelter, visiting Lucky every day after work. She brought small toys and an endless supply of patience and love. At first, Lucky kept his distance, but Emily sat quietly a few feet away, reading a book or speaking softly. She didn't force contact, letting Lucky approach her on his own terms. Slowly but surely, this patience bore fruit. One day, Lucky cautiously approached her, gently touching his nose to her hand as if testing the waters. Emily knew this small gesture was a monumental step in his healing journey. Over time, Lucky grew accustomed to Emily's presence and the kindness of the shelter staff. He began eating more heartily. His eyes regained some of their sparkle, though his fear of loud noises and strangers remained. He would still cower when someone unfamiliar entered or when he heard a sudden sound. But whenever he saw Emily, his eyes softened, and he seemed more at ease. One afternoon, Emily decided to take Lucky out to the small garden behind the shelter to enjoy some fresh air. At first, Lucky hesitated, moving cautiously. But with Emily's gentle encouragement, he slowly gained confidence. He began exploring the surroundings, sniffing the bushes, and even wagging his tail slightly when a flock of small birds flew by. It was the first time Emily had seen Lucky display a hint of joy since they met, and her heart swelled with happiness. Lucky's recovery was a long journey, not just physically but emotionally. Emily knew there were still many challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them alongside Lucky, one step at a time. Although his past was filled with pain and loss, she believed that with love and patience, Lucky would rediscover trust and joy in life and people. After weeks of care and bonding at the shelter, Emily knew she couldn't let Lucky go. The little dog, who had endured so much pain and loss, had carved out a special place in her heart. Every time she looked into Lucky's eyes that once held so much pain but now glimmered with a faint hope, Emily knew he deserved a true home. A place where he would be loved and cared for. And she realized no one was better suited to provide that than herself. Deciding to adopt Lucky wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was a promise she made to herself, to give him a new life, filled with love and safety. On the day Emily officially brought Lucky home, he was still cautious. The new collar around his neck bore a small tag with his name and Emily's phone number, a symbol that he now belonged to a family. During the car ride home, Lucky sat quietly in the back seat, his wide eyes observing everything around him. But his body remained tense, a clear sign of his lingering anxiety. Emily frequently glanced back at him, her voice gentle and soothing, "Everything will be okay, Lucky. This is our new home." She didn't expect Lucky to trust or adjust right away, but she was prepared to give him all the time he needed to feel the love he so deserved. When they arrived, Emily carefully led Lucky inside. Her cozy home had been meticulously prepared for his arrival. A soft new bed, a small corner filled with toys, and food and water bowls were ready and waiting. But Lucky remained hesitant. He walked cautiously, sniffing everything as if trying to make sense of this unfamiliar space. Emily didn't rush him, she allowed him to explore and adjust at his own pace. The first few days were challenging. Loud noises, like a door slamming or traffic outside, still startled Lucky. Sudden movements caused him to cower in fear, his eyes wide with panic. Emily recognized that his past traumas continued to haunt him and that healing would take time. Instead of pushing him, she chose patience. Each day, she sat near Lucky, reading or working quietly, allowing him to grow accustomed to her presence. Whenever Lucky showed signs of fear, Emily kept her voice calm and reassuring, never forcing him into situations that made him uncomfortable. Gradually, Lucky began to change. At first, he only dared to approach Emily when she sat still. But over time, he began lying down near her, eventually resting his head on her lap, a small yet monumental act of trust. Emily couldn't help but smile at his progress. Every time Lucky overcame a small fear, she praised him and rewarded him with his favorite treats, reinforcing his newfound confidence. The bond between Emily and Lucky grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, when Emily returned home from work, she was surprised to see Lucky run to the door to greet her, his tail wagging slightly and his eyes bright with excitement. It was the first time Lucky had shown such affection, and Emily couldn't hold back her tears. She knelt down and hugged him tightly, feeling the deep connection they now shared. Lucky was no longer a frightened stray but a true member of Emily's family. Emily also helped Lucky acclimate to the outside world. At first, their walks were slow and cautious, with Lucky frequently stopping at loud sounds or unfamiliar sights. But with Emily's encouragement, he grew bolder. Those tentative steps soon became confident strides, and Lucky even wagged his tail when passing other dogs. Emily stayed by his side, always reassuring him and making him feel safe. In the months that followed, Lucky transformed completely. Not only had he regained his physical strength, but his spirit had also healed. His once dull and matted golden coat now gleamed with health, and his eyes sparkled with joy. Lucky began showing affection more openly, running to Emily when she called, curling up beside her on the sofa, and even bringing her his favorite toys as a gesture of love. His joyful barks became a regular soundtrack to Emily's home, filling it with warmth and happiness she hadn't known before. For Emily, adopting Lucky wasn't just about saving a life, it was about transforming both of theirs. Lucky taught her patience, forgiveness, and the incredible resilience of love. Each day, Emily felt more certain that adopting Lucky was the best decision she had ever made. And for Lucky, After months of wandering in loneliness and fear, he had finally found a place to call home, a place where he truly belonged. Lucky had fully recovered, both physically and emotionally, after months of love and dedicated care. From a frail, fearful dog scarred by his past, Lucky had transformed into a joyful, energetic Labrador. His golden coat now gleamed with health, and his sparkling eyes radiated happiness. Each morning, Lucky would eagerly wait by the window, anticipating Emily's preparations for their daily park visits, the highlight of their day. The park, located not far from their home, was a sprawling expanse of green fields, shaded pathways, and a crystal-clear lake. It was Lucky's haven, a place where he could revel in freedom, breathe in the fresh air, and savor the joys of his new life. Emily always brought along Lucky's favorite toys, a small rubber ball or a frisbee that he loved chasing. They spent hours there, playing, running, and basking in the peace that nature offered. One day, as they enjoyed their usual outing, Emily watched Lucky, a picture of vitality as he bounded across the grass, his strong legs carrying him effortlessly, his tail wagging incessantly, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She realized Lucky had truly regained his trust in life and humanity. With a gentle smile, Emily decided it was time for Lucky to experience complete freedom. She crouched down and unclipped the leash from his collar. "Go on, Lucky. Run," she encouraged, her voice filled with affection. For a moment, Lucky froze, as if he couldn't believe he was truly free. But then, in an instant, he darted forward, sprinting across the open field. His ears flopped in the breeze, and his tail wagged more vigorously than ever. Lucky ran in wide, exuberant circles, occasionally glancing back at Emily as if to make sure she was still there, smiling at him. The moment was pure joy, a symbol of liberation and gratitude. The golden rays of the afternoon sun highlighted Lucky's vibrant coat, showcasing his beauty and vitality. For Emily, this wasn't just a dog running, it was a testament to resilience, love, and healing. Lucky was no longer the abandoned, fearful dog he once was. He had become an inseparable part of Emily's life, and she had found solace and meaning in their bond. Two souls once broken had found healing in each other, forging a connection that nothing could break. After their outing, they returned home, tired but happy. Lucky hopped onto his familiar spot on the sofa, where he often rested while Emily read or worked. But that evening, Emily decided to make things a little more special. She lit the fireplace, and the warm glow filled the room, banishing the winter chill. Emily sat on the rug, calling Lucky to her side. He obediently settled next to her, resting his head on her lap, a gesture of pure love and trust. As Emily gently stroked Lucky's soft fur, she felt his steady breathing and a profound sense of peace washed over her. She thought about the journey they had shared, from the first time she saw him curled up in that dark alley, his eyes filled with pain but flickering with hope, to this moment, where he was a vibrant, happy dog. She whispered softly, "We've come such a long way, haven't we, Lucky? But it was all worth it." Lucky shifted slightly, his eyes half closed, his tail wagging softly as if he understood her words. In the warmth of the firelight, they sat together, their bond unspoken but deeply felt. For Lucky, Emily was more than just his rescuer, she was his family, his safe haven. And for Emily, Lucky was a reminder of the power of love, patience, And resilience, a testament that even the most broken spirits could find healing through compassion. That night, as the fire died down and the room fell silent, Emily and Lucky remained by each other's side. It was a moment of quiet but profound connection. Both knew they had found a new beginning. A life filled not just with love but with meaning. And in this journey, they would always have each other, ready to face challenges and embrace every moment of happiness together.